Do you think it's too late to start? That age, circumstances, or missed opportunities are the biggest barriers holding you back? Perhaps all around you are whispered refrains like an old song, "I wish I'd done that sooner," or "At my age, it's too late." And you begin to believe it. But precisely when you think a door has closed, you're actually standing at the threshold of another door. A door most people never open because they've been convinced it doesn't exist. I'm not speaking theory here. I've lived it. At 30, after 3 failed rocket launches, I'd almost exhausted everything: money, time, energy, and faith. Not only the media and investors, but even those closest to me said, "Elon, that's enough." And to be honest, I nearly believed them. When you put everything into something and watch it collapse again and again, it's easy to believe you've run out of chances, that it's over, that nothing can be salvaged. But you know what I learned from that rock bottom moment? When you have nothing left to lose, that's when you have the chance to create something that never existed. It may sound paradoxical, but that's how reality works. People don't rise from ideal moments, but from the ashes of being smashed. And if you're reading this feeling in between, confused, or maybe you've skipped too many fresh starts in life, you're standing exactly where you need to be. Because the time you start again isn't when everything is perfect, but when you dare to drop the illusion that opportunity is only for the young. The truth is, starting early was never the deciding factor. I launched a tech startup at 24, yes, but that didn't help when I started SpaceX at 31 and Tesla at 32, risking hundreds of millions and near bankruptcy. There was no magic formula in being younger. Some begin an art career at 60, some launch their first startup at 72, some discover their life's purpose at 80. You're not too late. You're simply surrounded by people who have already given up in their minds long ago. The issue isn't your biological clock. The problem lies in the mindset you allow to dominate it. Too late is a concept that doesn't exist. It was invented to justify quitting. And you'll hear it from those who let go too soon, not from those still in motion. Not because they're smarter or swifter, but because they understand. The only reason someone doesn't start is they're waiting for the right time, which never comes. You might be looking back with regret, but regret is the sweetest feeling fear uses to chain you. It makes you think that if you could go back, you'd do it differently. But the truth is, you don't need to go back. You only need to start from where you are, whether you're 38, 51, or 67. Because the only thing that makes a difference isn't your birth year, it's the decision you make today. You don't need to be a more perfect version of yourself. You just need a braver one, willing to take the first step on an uncertain path. You don't need to start with confidence, you only need to start with action. And if there's still a small part of you believing you were born to do something bigger, more meaningful, more impactful, that is the signal. Not from me, but from the deepest part of you waiting to awaken. No, you're not too late. You're just entering a phase that most of the world lacks the patience to wait for. But if you dare to go on, you'll see a late start is actually an advantage, because you no longer hold illusions, chase glamour, or have time to waste. Now, you only have one thing worth fighting for: the truth of who you really are. No one is ever too late to begin something new, but many equate feeling late with an unchangeable reality. What hinders you isn't time, it's the voices around you. Voices that seem caring but plant sweet poison in your mind: doubt. They don't bluntly tell you to stop, they just smile, sigh, and say, "That time has passed." And by doing so, they plant a seed in your mind, a root beneath the surface that, if unnoticed, will cling to your belief and strangle everything you once thought you could do. You're not too late, you're just next to people who've stopped. And that's more dangerous than any limitation you thought came from age or circumstance. They aren't bad, they're just tired. They once tried, once dreamed, once wanted something bigger than themselves. But then they stumbled, and instead of rising, they chose to rationalize surrender. And when you're around them long enough, you begin to learn. Learning to fear failure, learning to wait for the right time, learning to think life has only one spring and you've missed it. Don't let others define your limits just because they no longer have the courage to pursue their own. It's not that you're late, you just haven't stood among people who believe in what doesn't yet exist. And I want you to think long and hard about this. When you share an idea, a longing, or a bold decision, who is the first person you go to? Do they fan the flames or extinguish them with reasons but no belief? A friend can pull you from a cliff or push you off if they're standing in the shadows. When I started SpaceX, many called me crazy. When I poured my remaining assets into Tesla while the company was bleeding cash, nearly every business advisor I knew said, pick one, you can't save both. But if I'd listened to them, do you think SpaceX would exist today? Tesla? Not at all. Not because I'm smarter than they were, but because I placed myself among people who believed if something has never existed, you need to try harder to create it. You need to change your environment, not just where you live, but the mental space you're constantly exposed to. Ask yourself, who are you talking to most every day? Do those conversations help you see farther, think bigger, become braver? Or do they make you withdraw, be overly cautious, fear the unseen? People are creatures of assimilation, not by behavior, but by vision. If you stay around those who no longer dream, you'll gradually forget what it feels like to yearn for something greater. Sadly, most people aren't living the wrong passion. They're living within limits set by relationships that make them forget themselves. It's not that you lack time, talent, or motivation. You only lack a new frame of reference. One where you aren't judged for starting late, but encouraged for daring to start at all. You need people who don't ask, how old are you still doing that, but ask, why do you choose this, and how can I help you go further? I met a woman who started learning programming at 63. Others called her reckless. I called it courageous. Because at an age when society tells you to rest, she chose to learn, to fail, to be rejected, to start completely anew. And she succeeded not because of a good memory or fast learning, but because she placed herself among people who didn't see age as a limit, but as valuable data of persistence. What do you want to accomplish for the rest of your life? Write a book, found a company, learn a totally new field? Don't ask, how old am I? Ask, who am I with? If your surroundings are filled with people who no longer dare to try, you'll think trying is foolish. But if you enter a room where people are learning, creating, struggling with something new every day, you'll see that the age you start doesn't matter. What matters is that you still have a chance to begin. And trust me, you do, as long as you're brave enough to leave the old room. Have you ever lain in a dark room, fully aware of what you need to do, knowing it's important, knowing if you don't start today, you'll postpone tomorrow, but still couldn't lift yourself or take action? You're not lazy, you're not incompetent. The issue isn't time, age, or being busy, it's something invisible yet deeply felt. Inner resistance. Resistance doesn't shout at you, it doesn't strike your face, it whispers sweetly, you can do it tomorrow. It tells you that you need more info, more preparation, more certainty, that now isn't the right time. And you believe it because that voice comes from inside you. But the truth is, that's not you. It's an old, cautious, fear-laden version of you shaped by past wounds. I've faced that resistance many times, not just once, not merely in the early startup years, but even after building billion-dollar companies. Before each product launch, each project reveal, each major decision, I still hear it. That paralysis, that feeling the body knows what to do, but the mind clings to thousands of unnamed excuses. And the key is, it doesn't weaken with time, it just gets smarter. Inner resistance doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care how far you've come. It doesn't vanish with success. In fact, it often grows stronger when you're about to do something significant, when you stand on the threshold of a meaningful step. It's like a headwind you must fight to take off. And if you don't recognize it, you mistake it for intuition and retreat. You'll think that anxiety means you're on the wrong path, when in fact, because you're on the right path, it appears to stop you. I spent hundreds of nights like that, not because I didn't love the work or believe in the mission, but because fatigue, pressure, and fear of failure accumulated, then unexpectedly hit me exactly when I needed to move forward. That's inner resistance at its deepest level. It doesn't attack from outside, but from within. And thus, it's hardest to overcome. I've seen brilliant engineers, visionary founders, talented people with breakthrough ideas all collapse not because of the market or competitors, but because they let internal resistance win. They procrastinate, they wait, they retreat. And then, as a form of self-defense, they rewrite their life story to dull the pain. I didn't really want it that much. The market changes too fast. I'm too busy. But the truth is they lost before they even started. You need to understand this clearly. Feelings of fear, uncertainty, unease, they're not signals to stop. They're signals that you're nearing something important. If you feel nothing, if you're always comfortable, always calm, maybe you're too far from the border of growth. And if you keep waiting until you feel ready, you'll wait forever, because resistance never disappears, it just steps back, then waits at the next checkpoint. The only way to beat resistance isn't to eliminate it, it's to act despite its presence. Don't wait for feelings to change. Don't wait for the perfect morning. Don't wait for validation. Don't wait for someone's nod. As long as you take a step, no matter how small, you're breaking its power. One email sent, one line written, one call made, old statements to yourself. I choose action over fear. You aren't blocked by time, you're blocked by yourself, by the version that hasn't yet believed you're capable, deserving, strong enough. And the good news is, you don't need more proof. You need a choice. Resistance will still be there, but you'll be stronger, clearer, firmer, because once you confront it and keep moving, it no longer controls you. You're in control. No one forbids you from restarting, but sadly, you're doing that to yourself. Not by saying it out loud, but through thoughts repeated silently. I tried and failed before. At this age, restarting is weird. What will people think if I fail again? These words aren't loud or harsh, but they seep in deeply, firmly convincing. They make you stay put, not because you lack ability, but because you believe you've lost the right to try again. You were once bold. You had big dreams, steps beyond your comfort zone. But at some point, maybe after a failure, a rejection, a ridicule, you built a defense system around yourself. You became more realistic, more cautious, less daring, and you thought that was maturity. But sometimes the realism you live in is just a polite name for surrender. I've met too many people who aren't lacking ability, passion, or opportunity. They only lack one thing, giving themselves permission to start over. They carry an invisible burden called accumulated identity. I'm an accountant, a teacher, a mother, someone who used to, and those used to be's become shackles. They think they can't pivot, can't relearn, can't be new, because people are used to it. Let me be frank. If you live by the image others expect, you'll die in an acceptance you never chose. No one locks you in a role, a label, or a past, except you. You're not your past. You're the version you choose to be today, and that choice requires only one decision. I will start again, not because I failed, but because I have the courage not to repeat a life I no longer see myself in. I've moved from software to rockets, from electric cars to AI, then neural implants, not because I knew I'd be good at each field, but because I wouldn't let the old version decide the limits of the next one. Each restart made me relearn from scratch, ask childish questions, fail publicly before millions, and be judged mercilessly. But I accepted it, because I understood restarting doesn't diminish you, it makes you more real. People admire rebirth in stories, films, biographies, but they don't allow themselves to live it. Because they think rebirth is a magical event from outside. It isn't, it always comes from within. From the moment you stop finding reasons to remain in a worn-out shell and dare to step out, fragile, imperfect, but authentic. That's not recklessness, that's honesty. You don't need to restart with a perfect plan. You only need to begin with a small action, something the current version of you once thought you couldn't do. Write a paragraph, send an email, launch a product, meet someone, learn a skill. No one will hand you a license to reboot your life. You must sign it yourself. And if someone watches you, doubts you, mocks your new beginning, remember, mockery always comes from the crowd that stands still, not those marching forward. Reinvention requires letting go of some people, some beliefs, some habits. That's a kind of loss, but a necessary one, because no path to a better version avoids sacrifice. You don't need permission. No one needs to believe in you first. You don't need a grand reason to start over. You need one reason that's real enough. You haven't yet lived fully as you wish. And if that still resides in your heart, you still have enough reason to restart right now. Your life doesn't change in grand moments. Not on New Year's Eve when you write a goal list, not at a seminar when you shout your resolve, and certainly not when you feel inspired. Your life changes in the quietest part, morning. More accurately, the first hour after you wake. That's when most people miss the greatest chance to master their lives, simply because they don't realize it. Because they start their day in reactive mode rather than proactive. I was one of them. Wake up, reach for the phone, check email, read news, reply messages, scroll Twitter. Everything felt urgent, like I was starting work early. But in reality, I was letting others program my day. Streams of unsolicited updates, tasks that weren't priorities, unconscious comparisons, all poured in before I could set a mental shield. Result? I began the day scattered, rushed, directionless. And worse, I thought it was normal. But nothing great is built on a chaotic foundation. If you want to change your life, start with how you begin your day, because how you start each day is how you live your life. Morning isn't something to fight through, it's the first territory you must conquer if you want to master anything. I began change with a simple action, not touching my phone for the first 30 minutes after waking. No email, no news, no social media, just silence, a cup of coffee, an undisturbed space, sometimes just sitting and gazing out the window. It seems odd, even lazy, but in that silence, I found what technology and modern speed had stolen: clarity. When you begin the day with clarity, every decision that follows is sharper. You aren't pushed by notifications. You lead, you design, you act purposefully. And more importantly, you begin to create a new identity for yourself. A person who knows what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what's worthy of their energy. I use a technique called time anchoring, attaching the most important action of the day to the same time and place, regardless of mood. It could be writing, reading, learning, designing, or decision-making. Repeating the same behavior each morning at the same time builds a natural reflex, almost instinctual. It turns actions into identity. You don't need motivation to do it, you simply are that person. And when that happens, every resistance you once faced weakens over time. The question is, what did you do this morning in your first hour? Did you start the day with triumph or distractions, proactivity or being pulled by the outside world? If you're unhappy with how your day unfolds, don't change midday. Go back to the morning, rebuild from the root. No need to change 10 habits at once. Just pick one thing you know is important and protect it as if your life depends on it, because, in fact, it does. Don't underestimate the value of a quiet morning, an hour of deep work, a decision made consciously. Those small things, when repeated consistently, have the power to rebuild your destiny. Life doesn't change when you have more time. It changes when you know how to use the least time, your first hour, to put yourself into the highest gear. Remember, if you don't control the morning, you control nothing. Every big action starts with a small victory, and no victory is more essential than the first of the day. This isn't philosophy. It's a practical tool, measurable and deployable starting tomorrow morning. You can sit alone in a room and imagine 100 times that you're creative, a writer, a leader, disciplined. You can read books, watch videos, feel your heart race, mind light up, but if you do nothing with that inspiration, it evaporates, leaving only a tinge of regret that you once felt motivated but didn't use it. Because identity isn't formed in your head, it's forged in action. And not a single action, but repeated action. We live in an era that worships inspiration. Social media, self-help books, motivational videos, they all promise that if you think right, you'll live right. But reality doesn't work that way. You may think you're decisive, but if you continually avoid hard choices, you're teaching your brain the opposite. You may believe you're hardworking, but if you keep postponing important tasks day after day, you're rewriting your identity, a procrastinator. How you behave each day sends signals to your nervous system that say, this is who I am. You act and you become. And essentially, your nervous system doesn't care about your intentions, it only records your actions. So if you say you're focused but spend 45 minutes every morning scrolling, those words lose meaning. Your actions are the truth. And that truth, when repeated, becomes the foundation of your identity. I didn't start with the habits of a CEO or a rocket engineer. I was once scattered, procrastinating, out of control. But I learned early what most learn late. You don't need to feel like a pro to act like one. You act like one first, and your body learns to believe it's who you are. When I wrote the first lines of Tesla's business plan, I didn't know if the company would succeed. When I started reading rocket books to build SpaceX, I wasn't sure I was smart enough. But I didn't need to feel ready to start. I just kept repeating the right behavior long enough that it became instinct. Habits don't just change your performance, they restructure your identity. Every time you sit to write, you signal, I am a writer. Every time you refuse an irrelevant invitation to focus on your project, you affirm, I know my priorities. You don't need recognition, degrees, or labels. Your actions are the most powerful confirmation. Identity isn't something you discover, it's something you build. No one's born creative, disciplined, focused, courageous. These qualities are results of small actions repeated daily, often when no one's watching. And because identity can be built, you can erase it, rebuild, reshape any time. No need to wait for Monday, a new month, or a new year. You only need to start acting like who you want to be right now. A real change never starts with emotion. It starts with small discipline, a morning block you don't skip, an action you take even without inspiration, a promise you keep to yourself even when no one's asking, because that's when you program yourself line by line, and when those lines repeat, a new you begins to emerge, not on social media, but in how you face each morning, respond to pressure, choose between the easy and the right. You don't need more inspiration, you need a series of small, correct, consistent actions, repeated until you no longer need motivation to do them. That's the moment you know you've changed. Not because others say you have, but because you no longer have to try to be the new version you already are. Burnout doesn't happen because you work late or face relentless deadlines. It doesn't suddenly strike like a storm. It comes slowly, silently, bit by bit. Each time you work without knowing what you're doing, for whom and why, each time you open your computer and get lost in the chaos of emails, messages, meetings, browser tabs, notifications, and unnamed demands that keep you busy but never finished. At day's end, you can't remember what mattered, only feeling drained, as if you have no energy left to live the rest of your life beyond work. But it's not because you work too much, it's because you lost control. You may have started with a clear goal, create value, build something meaningful, live proactively. But over time, you let trivial details seize the entire picture. You no longer live in a seamless flow. You get pulled from it every few minutes by notifications, demands, tasks outside your priority list. And worst, you get used to it. You think it's normal, but that normal is burning your nervous system every hour until it alarms you with exhaustion, lack of motivation, and a sense of being stuck. Because I've lived days like that. 9 a.m., SpaceX meeting, 10 a.m., Tesla call, 11 a.m., legal dispute, noon, check production. By 1 p.m., my mental energy was drained, not because I couldn't handle the work, but because I let my brain expend energy on trivial decisions instead of saving it for the real problems that needed me. That's when I realized I didn't need more coffee, more hours, or vacation. I needed to rebuild systems to protect clarity in my mind. I started by removing noise. No email before 10 a.m., no meetings before finishing one value-creating task, no interruptions in mission blocks, time reserved for solving one big problem, no multitasking, no reaction, just focus and value creation. Because what few tell you is the exhaustion you feel isn't from doing too much, but from switching contexts too often. Every time you jump from one task to another, open a tab, read a message, check your phone, return to unfinished work, you pay a cognitive switching cost. You pay with clarity, focus, and mental health. That's why you feel tired by midday, even though you've gotten nothing tangible done. You don't need to work less. You need to work more purposefully. You don't need to go faster. You need consistent pace direction. You don't need more tasks done. You need one thing done each day. I discovered 3 ways to restore energy when I noticed depletion. 1, stand up and walk, even a few minutes away. 2, breathe through your nose, inhale 4 seconds, exhale 6 seconds, repeat 5 times. 3, switch input. No screens, no digital sound, just another stimulus. Nature, silence, or a real conversation. You don't need a spa or expensive retreat, you just need space for your brain to recover. And above all, you need to redesign boundaries, not to eliminate everything, but to protect the one thing that can't be bought, clarity in your mind. Without clear boundaries, everything floods in, you lose control, you burn out. But when you know what matters, say no, block out what doesn't serve, core mission, you don't only work better, you live differently. So if you're tired without understanding why, don't just ask, how much am I doing? Ask, What's controlling me? And if you don't know the answer, that's the clearest signal you lost the wheel long ago. The good news? You can take it back right now. Collapse isn't when you fail. Real collapse happens when you sit down, look at what you believed in, and start telling yourself, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should stop. That's the most dangerous moment. Not because you've lost something, but because you begin to stop believing you can rebuild. It's silent, no loud bang, no alarms, just a quiet withdrawal inside. You keep working, keep smiling, keep living, but deep down you know you stopped fighting. I once sat in Tesla's factory parking lot at midnight, alone, nothing running, no cash to pay salaries, deals falling apart, media calling Tesla a scam. I didn't know if I'd survive that week. Not the company, but me, the person inside. When you've given everything and still see collapse, you begin questioning yourself. Are you good enough? Are you chasing something pointless? Are you just stubbornly persisting? But what I learned in that moment, and many times after, is inspiration doesn't come to save you from collapse. Action does. When everything is at its worst, don't wait for your mood to improve. Don't wait for your spirit to recover. Don't hope someone says the right word at the right time. They won't. The only thing that can break the downward spiral is an action, no matter how small, however fragile. I have a rule called 3 crisis escape steps that I apply whenever things free fall. 1, name the truth. No excuses, no softening. Say exactly what's happening uncolored. I just lost a major deal. I'm out of cash. I was rejected. I feel like I have nothing left. Brutal honesty is the first step to stop running in chaos. 2, face me sit in the position of me. That question recurrent in mindset and placing yourself in the position of high intelligence pulls you back into solution mindset. That question refocuses you on action. 3, do one irreversible action. Make that key call. Send the draft you keep delaying. Cancel a commitment you know isn't right. Enroll in the course you need. One action, but concrete and irreversible. That action is an anchor. Pulls you from paralysis and forces you to continue, even if your brain wants to freeze. It sounds simple, but you'll be surprised how effective it is. Most people aren't defeated by circumstance, they're defeated by inner paralysis. When everything outside goes wrong and they stand still too long until they begin to believe standing still is safe. But truth is, standing still too long in suffering isn't rest, it's starting to erase yourself. You don't need to restore all your energy to move forward. You need to break the chain of delay with a single stroke. Action. When you're collapsing, you don't need to know everything to do over the next 3 months. You just need to know what's next and can I do it now? If yes, do it. If not, simplify it further until you can't say no. The difference between those who collapse and those who rise isn't circumstance. It's speed of action in the darkest moment. People think they must wait for light to walk, but light doesn't come for those who sit and wait. It comes for those who dare to step, even when they see nothing. And often, just taking those first few steps, you begin to see the path, not because the path changed, but because you did. When everything collapses, don't search for a positive emotion to restart. Choose a simple action and do it. Because if you do it once, you can do it again. And if you do it again, you re-enter the race, and this time you're stronger than the one who collapsed. Not because you're luckier, but because you didn't wait to be saved. You saved yourself with action. Greatness doesn't happen by chance. No one accidentally builds something memorable. No one randomly creates an extraordinary life. Everything is built from purposeful choices, from seemingly small principles strong enough to hold you steady when everything else shakes. Because you will be challenged, doubted, judged, and many times you will question yourself. In those moments, you don't need more motivation. You need principles. Principles clear enough to remind you why you began, strong enough to keep you going when everything becomes unclear. Here are 5 principles I live by. and they've helped me build everything from technology to company to how I think about myself. Principle 1, if it's not worth dying for, don't build it. It sounds extreme, but think, if a goal isn't big enough for you to give time, sleep, reputation, money, even your pride, then you'll abandon it at the first sign of difficulty. But if you choose something you believe must exist, that if you don't do it, the world loses something important, you'll find a way to continue, whatever happens. That spirit doesn't come from glamour. It comes from deep commitment to something worth fighting for. Principle 2, obsession beats intelligence. The world isn't led by the smartest people, but by those who can't stop thinking about one thing. Obsession isn't negative if placed correctly. I don't work 16 hours a day because I'm hardworking, but because I can't stop thinking about what I'm building. If you need an alarm or reminders to continue, you haven't found something you're deeply obsessed with. When you're obsessed, you don't need others pushing. You pull yourself back to the mission daily without anyone noticing. Principle 3, a bad launch beats idea death. I've seen too many people drown with great ideas, just because they waited for it to be nicer, more complete, certain. Meanwhile, someone else with a less brilliant idea launches, learns from real feedback, and moves forward. You never know if what you build will work until it hits the real world. Don't perfect it in the dark. Let collisions with reality refine it. Action always beats expectation. Perfection doesn't exist. Progress sustains you. Principle 4, speed is an unfair advantage. Most people don't fail for lack of ideas, but because they move too slowly. They think another few weeks/months gives certainty, but while they think, someone else acts, errs, corrects, moves ahead. The market doesn't wait, opportunity doesn't wait, and most importantly, momentum doesn't wait. Action builds momentum. Hesitation builds excuses. If you have an idea, make a prototype in 24 hours. If a decision, act this week. Speed doesn't just keep you ahead, it makes you a threat to those slower. Principle 5, solve real problems, not hype. Every day, there's a new trend, new tech, something making you feel, if you don't join, you'll fall behind. But most of today's buzz is forgotten tomorrow. Don't chase the crowd. Listen to the real world, unresolved pains, unfilled gaps, unanswered questions. Because when you solve a real problem, you don't need to sell or attract attention. The world will find you because you've made what they actually need. There's rockets over apps, electric cars over entertainment apps, real solutions over temporary hype. These 5 principles aren't just a work compass. They're the backbone of a purpose-driven life. You don't need 10 rules or a complex philosophy, just a few truths you believe absolutely and are ready to live and die by them daily. And if you live like that long enough, greatness will come, not because you demand it, but because you become someone worthy of it. This world doesn't lack people good at analyzing, judging, critiquing. We have a generation that scrolls, likes, shares, comments on others' creations, but the more that people stand up and do, the rarer they become. And I believe you didn't come to this life to be an audience. You weren't born just to consume what others create. You're here to build. Every time you get an idea but do nothing with it, you train your brain to default to, I'm not the doer. Every time you sit and watch someone else build, start up, write, speak, you may feel admiration, even moved, but if you don't turn that admiration into action, you're locking yourself into spectator mode, and you can't live a brilliant life if you're always off stage. I used to consume a lot, books, ideas, videos, knowledge, but what truly changed my life was stopping accumulation and starting creation. I wrote ideas down, sketched models, made calls, knocked on doors, got to work, not because I was sure of success, but because I couldn't continue living in someone else's world. I wanted to build my own. And that doesn't require genius, it just requires stepping off the audience stand. I'm not saying don't learn, don't observe, don't listen, but all that is only the start. If you don't turn knowledge into action, you're turning yourself into storage with no output. That's what makes you confused, lost, feeling small. Not because you're not good enough, but because you haven't been used properly. A consumer waits for opportunity. A creator makes it. A consumer asks, has anyone done this? A creator asks, if no one has, why not me? The difference isn't ability, it's mindset. And that mindset is forged through small daily actions. Do you write or just read? Do you launch or just watch others start? Do you contribute or just observe? If you feel directionless, repetitive, low fuel, it might not be because you need more inspiration. It's because you've consumed too much without enough action. And your mind is a machine built to create. If you don't let it, it builds pressure, then fights back with fatigue, doubt, even depression. Not because you're weak, but because you're not being put to use. I once said, if this is the last time I speak to you, I want you to remember one thing. Act as if the future depends on you. Because maybe what you're about to create will inspire someone in despair. Maybe the book you haven't written will save someone needing the right words at the right time. Maybe the venture you haven't launched will create hundreds of jobs. Maybe your voice will open a new door for a community. But none of that will happen unless you act. You don't need to do something grand immediately. Just declare your beginning, write the first line, build the first prototype, send the first invite, post the first piece. No one's born a creator. But every creator once began. When they were uncertain, unsupported, unready, they only knew, I can't live like this forever. And that's when everything changed. So right here, I want you to write, I will begin creating underscore, 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 and I begin today. Fill in the blank. No complexity, no elegance, just the truth. Because that truth, once written and turned into action, marks the first step of a journey only you can walk. You're not here to repeat. You're not here to consume until end of life. You're here to build something that outlasts you. An idea, a business, a meaningful journey. And if you dare to begin, the world will pay attention.